Hey, my Reddit story lovers. Welcome back to Bedtime Blocks. Tonight's story is a powerful and emotional ride about ambition, betrayal, and the pain of watching your dreams unravel at the hands of someone you trusted most. And it's a journey through heartbreak, resilience, and finding the strength to rebuild when it feels like everything has been stripped away. So settle in, get comfortable, and let this story unfold as you drift into the night. I never thought one person could dismantle everything I worked for with just a few carefully chosen words. But that's exactly what she did. And the worst part? I trusted her more than anyone else in the world. It was a Thursday afternoon when I first realized something was off. The studio smelled faintly of coffee and warm dust from the lights, the kind of comforting scent I usually associated with long days of filming. I'd been on sets like this for years, polished wooden floors, humming equipment, muffled chatter echoing off the walls. It was home. But that day, when I walked in, conversations cut short. People looked at me, then quickly looked away. You learn to pick up on subtleties in this industry. The way a crew member lingers near the monitor, the slight hesitation in a producer's voice. And that day, every glance carried a weight I couldn't yet place. Then I saw her, Sophie. Her dark hair was pulled back, eyes sharp and unreadable. She smiled faintly when she noticed me, but it wasn't the same smile I'd grown accustomed to. It was colder, controlled. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, though something in my gut tightened. "Rough morning?" "Something like that," she replied. Her voice was calm, too calm, like a surgeon preparing for a cut. I brushed it off at first, convincing myself I was paranoid. After all, Sophie was my closest friend, my manager, and the person who'd pulled me out of obscurity years ago. She had shaped my career, guided me through contracts, and stood by me when I faltered. I owed her everything, or so I thought. But as the hours passed and whispers rippled through the studio, I began to sense that whatever Sophie had done, or was about to do, wasn't just going to hurt me. It was going to end me. And I wasn't wrong. The first real blow came in the form of silence. Not the ordinary kind, but the heavy silence of absence. My name missing from the lineup sheet. My calls unanswered. My chair empty at the briefing table. I noticed it when the assistant director passed out updated schedules. My role, my leading role, had vanished from the page, replaced by a blank space that someone had carelessly highlighted yellow. "What the hell?" I muttered, scanning the sheet again as if repetition might fix it. The assistant avoided my eyes. Maybe talk to Sophie," he said quickly, before rushing off with the stack. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Sophie was leaning against a lighting rig nearby, her phone in hand, as though she were orchestrating everything with a simple swipe of her screen. When I approached, she slipped the phone into her pocket, her expression unreadable. "My name's not on the schedule," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. She tilted her head, feigning surprise. "Oh? Must have been an oversight." An oversight? The word tasted bitter. This wasn't some typo, this was deliberate. "You knew about this," I pressed. Sophie sighed, looking at me the way someone might look at a broken clock, pity mixed with irritation. "Listen, they're making changes. You know how this industry is, things shift. It's nothing personal." Nothing personal. I wanted to laugh, scream, both at once, because everything about this was personal. I walked back toward the corner of the studio, my chest tight, ears ringing. People's eyes followed me, pretending not to. The cameras, the microphones, the buzzing fluorescents, all the tools of my world suddenly felt hostile, like they were documenting my downfall in real time. That was the first fracture in the foundation Sophie had built beneath me. And I knew it wouldn't be the last. By the time lunch rolled around, the tension had congealed into something I could practically taste. Thick, metallic, like the air before a storm. The usual laughter at the catering table was gone, replaced by hushed conversations and darting eyes. My tray sat untouched in front of me, steam curling up from the pasta while I tried to swallow the knot in my throat. Sophie sat across the room, flanked by producers. Their heads bent close together, her hand resting lightly on one of their arms as she spoke. She wasn't just my manager anymore, she was something else. Someone I didn't recognize. I remembered the nights we used to sit in diners at 2 a.m., going over scripts line by line, her voice soft with encouragement. Back then, she had felt like an anchor in an ocean of uncertainty. Now, she was the storm. I forced myself to stand, the chair legs screeching against the tile. A few heads turned as I crossed the room. Sophie looked up mid-conversation, her smile just a little too polished. "Can we talk?" I asked, voice low but edged with heat. The producer beside her cleared his throat. "We're in the middle of something." I didn't break eye contact with her. "Now." She sighed as though I'd inconvenienced her, then excused herself and followed me into the hallway. The corridor smelled faintly of paint and gaffer tape, the distant hum of generators vibrating through the walls. "What's going on, Sophie?" I demanded. "Why am I not on the call sheet? Why is everyone acting like I don't exist?" Her face didn't change. She leaned against the wall, arms folded. "Because they're moving on, and you should too." It was like being punched without warning. "Moving on?" "You're difficult," she said carefully. "Demanding. They think the production's smoother without you. I've tried to defend you, but..." She trailed off, letting the silence finish her sentence. In that moment, I realized the unthinkable. Sophie wasn't defending me at all. She was leading the charge. That night, I couldn't sleep. My apartment felt smaller than usual, the air stale with the scent of old takeout containers I hadn't thrown away. I paced the floor, bare feet slapping against hardwood, phone clutched tight in my hand as I scrolled through unread messages. None of them were from Sophie. None of them were from the studio either. Everywhere I turned online, though, I saw the ripples. Anonymous posts on forums, whispered rumors on industry blogs. Unprofessional. Impossible to work with. Egomaniac. Words I had never seen tied to my name before. Words I knew Sophie had the power to plant. I remembered something she'd told me once, half drunk at a rap party. Perception is everything. Doesn't matter who you really are, just what they think you are. Back then it had sounded like wisdom. Now it felt like a threat. I tried calling her. No answer. Texts went unread. It was as though she'd cut a cord, leaving me adrift. I sat on the edge of my couch, staring at the city lights outside my window, their glow blurring through the glass. "Why?" I whispered to no one. Why would she destroy me after everything we'd built together? After every late-night rehearsal, every crisis managed, every contract negotiated? The thought that clawed at me most wasn't anger, it was betrayal. This was the woman who had once told me I was destined for greatness, who had believed in me when no one else did. And now she was dismantling me piece by piece, not with explosions, but with whispers. I finally lay back, pressing my palms against my eyes until I saw stars. But the only thing I could think about was how easily she'd turned my dream into a nightmare. And I knew the worst was yet to come. The next morning, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. For a moment, hope flared that it might be Sophie, but when I answered, the voice on the other end was clipped and professional. "Mr. Hale, this is Dana from Everline Productions. I'm afraid we'll be moving forward without you on this project." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean? I was already contracted." "Contracts can be adjusted." I'm sure Sophie explained the situation. I gripped the phone tighter. "She hasn't explained anything." A pause, then a sigh. "Look, off the record, your reputation has become a liability. Too many people are saying the same thing. We can't risk it." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there on the edge of my bed, phone heavy in my hand. My reputation, my career, everything I'd worked for since I was a kid running lines in front of a cracked bathroom mirror. All of it undone by too many people saying the same thing. And I knew exactly whose voice had started the chorus. The second blow hit my bank account before it hit my pride. I woke to a ping from my banking app and a sick little dip in my stomach. 3 incoming payments reversed overnight. 2 sponsorship fees and a residual that used to show up like clockwork. The apartment smelled of stale coffee and the toast I'd forgotten in the oven, edges singed and brittle. I stood at the sink chewing a corner anyway because I needed my hands to be doing something that wasn't shaking. I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked like it was impatient with me. Email stacked in, given recent concerns. After careful consideration, we're pausing our relationship effective immediately. I skimmed, then forced myself to read again, word by lawyered word. It was all the same sentence dressed in different suits. No one wanted to be associated with me, not while the water was this muddy. I called the rep from Lumaware, the brand I'd worn since my first red carpet. Kara, it's me. A sigh, paper rustling. I'm so sorry, Evan. Sorry doesn't mean much, I said, then softened, because she wasn't the enemy. Tell me straight, what did you hear? There was a pause long enough to grow mold. That you've become volatile. That you screamed at a PA that you don't show up prepared. I closed my eyes. The radiator clicked and hissed behind me like a tired animal. You've known me for years. I do, she said, voice threading with regret. But I don't make these calls. When we hung up, the apartment's silence felt dishonest. Too clean for the chaos in my chest. I leaned my forehead against the cool window, watching the street move briskly below. Somewhere, Sophie was typing. Somewhere, she was opening doors that would close on my fingers. I knew money wasn't the point. It was proof. Proof that the whispers had taken root. And if they had, then the next part wouldn't just bruise my wallet, it would carve into who I believed I was. The carving started that afternoon. The clip wasn't even new, that's what stung. It was a Frankenstein of old footage from a behind-the-scenes segment, spliced with audio from a rehearsal where I'd been venting about a rewrite. By the time it hit the podcast circuit, it sounded like I was tearing into a crew member. My voice tight, sharp, a woman's voice off camera, edited to sound small and trembling. I listened with palms sweating on the keyboard. Breaths had been trimmed. My laugh, originally tired and self-deprecating, now rang like contempt. The room in the clip smelled back to me. The memory of dust and cable rubber, that metallic tang from the lighting rigs, and my stomach turned because I knew exactly who had managed my access to that footage. Sophie had the keys to all my archives. I called Mia, a sound engineer who'd saved me more than once. Tell me I'm not crazy. She pulled the file into her software while we stayed on the line. I paced grooves into the rug. The glow of the laptop painted the living room a cold aquarium blue. Okay, she said finally. I heard the soft clack of her keyboard, the little tosk she made when she found something. They cut breaths. They even shifted syllables. Listen. She played it back slowed, and there it was. An unnatural seam, a microscopic hitch like scar tissue in a sentence. This is stitched. Good job, but not invisible. So, I fight it? I asked. You can try, but once a clip becomes a feeling people have about you, you're not arguing with audio anymore. You're arguing with their certainty. I swallowed, throat dry. If I go public with the proof, waveforms, timestamps, does it help? Mia hesitated. It looks defensive, and it risks bringing more ears to the lie. I thanked her because gratitude was the only muscle I trusted to work. After we hung up, I stared at the frozen frame on my screen. My own mouth caught mid-word. I didn't recognize the man in that still. That was the danger. If I didn't move carefully, I'd become him. And I had a feeling Sophie wanted exactly that. I decided to fight back, and that was the mistake she'd been waiting for. I wrote a statement, measured, honest, calm. I talked about context, about editing, about the people who knew me beyond a headline. I mentioned the surgical seams Mia found without throwing her under the bus. I hit post, the way you pull a ripcord. For 10 blissful minutes, there was quiet. Then the replies started. Earnest at first, a handful of familiar names. Then the swarm arrived, like a flock that had been circling and finally spotted its landing strip. Classic non-apology. Blaming the editor, wow. Can't handle criticism. Screenshots bloomed like weeds, an old text I'd sent Sophie after a grueling 16-hour day, saying I couldn't do this pace again without burning out, now framed as me refusing work. A clipped email where I asked for a weekend to rest, now captioned, he thinks he's too good to show up. It didn't take a detective to guess who had the receipts and the interest to arrange them so artfully. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I answered, exhausted. Mr. Hale, this is Arjun Patel, Entertainment Law. A mutual friend suggested I reach out. His voice was calm, unhurried, like a therapist who'd read all the spoilers. You're being defamed, potentially, but the bar is high, and the process is ugly. Are you prepared for ugly? I looked around at the apartment. The pile of unopened mail, the aching quiet, the photo on the bookshelf of me and Sophie under a neon sign the night we landed our first contract. The photo tilted in its frame like it had lost balance too. Ugly is already here, I said. Then we start with preservation, Arjun replied. Screenshots, metadata, who had access, we send letters, we don't swing wildly. His plan was clean, disciplined, hopeful in the way scaffolding is hopeful. You trust it until the wind picks up. I agreed, because I needed someone to measure the storm. As I hung up, a new notification flashed. An exclusive interview. Sophie sitting in a tasteful chair, ready to talk. The caption promised honesty. My stomach knew better. The worst part was still unfolding, and I was tuned in, live. Rock bottom wasn't a dramatic crash. It was the quiet click of my door when I returned from a walk, and realized I'd left the lights off because saving electricity suddenly mattered. It was the fridge's soft hum as I stared at the same carton of eggs, counting meals like a kid counts marbles. It was the landlord's neutral email reminding me the lease renewed in 2 months, and he'd understand if circumstances required a smaller unit. My feet took me outside at night because the apartment smelled like tiredness and yesterday's coffee, and the city's air tasted like wet metal and fried food from late-night carts. I walked past posters for shows I used to be in, my face now replaced with another jawline, another smile. It hurt, but the pain had edges I could live with. I ended up at the small theater where I'd auditioned for a black box play 15 years ago. The lobby still had that comforting mix of dust and citrus cleaner, and the bulletin board was overrun with flyers for improv classes, staged readings, missing cats. Rosa, the artistic director, sat at the desk, reading a script with a pen clenched between her teeth. She looked up slowly, then smiled without surprise. I was wondering when you'd come home, she said, and the word home nearly undid me. I don't know where else to go, I admitted. My voice didn't crack, but something behind it did. Rosa stood and hugged me, smelling like peppermint and printer ink. Then sit, she said. Read something. I took a chair on the stage where the dust motes turned in the light like tiny private galaxies. My hands steadied around the script. When I read the first line, my voice felt like it belonged to me again. Not to a clip, not to a rumor, not to a curated collapse. Afterward, Rosa tilted her head. You're softer, she said. In a good way. Whatever burnt down, your voice found air. I stared into the dark seats and tried to believe that a thing could be both broken and finally breathing. That night, I slept, not well, but honestly. In the morning, I knew what I had to ask her. Rosa didn't ask what happened. She asked what was true. We sat with paper cups of theater coffee, thin, slightly bitter, weirdly perfect, and she said, "If the noise outside stops, what's left of you on stage?" "Not much," I said, half joking, half scared. "Then that's where we start." She offered me something small and stubborn, a spot in a workshop for monologues, Tuesday nights, no press, no cameras, no expectations beyond showing up. The rehearsal room smelled like paint, dust, and old sweat. Familiar, forgiving. The floor tape peeled up at the corners like it had stories of its own. I read to 6 folding chairs and a woman with a highlighter tucked behind her ear. I worked on breath again, the kind you can't edit out. I learned to leave space in a sentence and trust it wouldn't be filled with someone else's meaning. On the 3rd week, after I finished a piece about a man who mistakes ambition for intimacy, Rosa leaned forward. "That one's yours," she said. "It has the tremor of something lived." I nodded, eyes hot, a little embarrassed by tears in a room this small. "I don't know how to be anything else anymore," I said. "Good," she replied, and the word felt like flint struck just right. That means the costume fell off. After class, I walked home in a soft rain, the kind that makes streets smell like pennies and wet stone. When I unlocked my door, an email waited from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, "You deserved better." Inside was a single sentence. "If you want proof of what she did, meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m., Fountain and 3rd, no phones." There was no signature, just a blurred photo attached. A glimpse of a hard drive with a label I recognized in Sophie's handwriting. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something like direction. Maybe this wasn't about reclaiming a title anymore. Maybe it was about reclaiming a truth. I set my alarm, laid out dry clothes, and rehearsed what silence I would keep when I showed up at the corner and finally asked for the rest. The morning of the meeting felt heavier than it should have. The city was damp from last night's rain, the air cool enough to sting when I stepped outside. I shoved my hands into my jacket pockets and walked toward Fountain and 3rd with the kind of unease that makes every passing face suspicious. My shoes slapped against the wet pavement, the smell of car exhaust and coffee drifting past as I tried to slow my breathing. When I reached the corner, I half expected no one to be there. That maybe it was a prank, another twist of the knife. But someone leaned against the bus stop, hood up, posture tense. He looked up as I approached, and recognition clicked. Nate, one of the junior editors I'd worked with last year. Always quiet, always invisible in the background. "You came," he said, voice low. "You sent the email?" He nodded, then glanced around before pulling something from his backpack, a small external drive, black and scuffed, label torn halfway off. She didn't cover her tracks as well as she thought. I backed up copies before she locked us out. I reached for it, but he held on. His eyes darted nervously at the street. "I'm risking a lot. If they find out, they won't hear it from me," I promised. "Why help me?" He hesitated, then sighed. "Because I watched her splice that clip. I watched her rehearse her story before she went on camera. And I don't care how this industry works. No one deserves to have their life gutted for someone else's promotion." The drive pressed into my palm, cool and solid. My heart hammered. "What's on it?" Raw files, emails, even her pitch deck, the one she used to sell the narrative to the studio. She called it the Hale problem. The phrase hit me like a slap. I wanted to laugh at the absurd cruelty, but all I managed was a tight nod. "Thank you," I said. Nate just shook his head. "Don't thank me yet. Use it, or else she wins." When he walked away, the drive felt heavier than metal should. It was proof, maybe even salvation. But proof is useless without courage. And that part, I wasn't sure I still had. Back at my apartment, I sat at the desk staring at the little black drive like it might detonate. The room was quiet except for the whir of my old fan, slicing the air in a steady rhythm. I plugged it in, hands trembling. and the folder tree unfolded like a map of betrayal. First came the raw footage, the uncut versions of the scenes she had twisted. I clicked one open. My own voice filled the room, tired but not cruel, joking in a way that made the crew laugh. There was no sharpness, no contempt. Side by side with the viral clip, the contrast was staggering. The lie was undeniable. Then the emails. I scrolled through message after message Sophie had sent under my name. CC'd to producers, assistants, even clients. She'd written complaints I never made, demands I never issued, words that turned me into a caricature of arrogance. My chest burned as I read them, each line of blade slipped between my ribs. Finally, the pitch deck. The title stared back in bold font. The Hale Problem. Restructuring the narrative. My name reduced to a bullet point, a hurdle to be managed. Each slide detailed how distancing the studio from me would restore trust and refresh branding. And on the last page, in neat font at the bottom, presented by Sophie Linton. I pushed back from the desk, bile rising. The woman who once told me I was her greatest discovery had turned me into her stepping stone. My phone buzzed. A new notification. Sophie had posted another interview clip, polished and pristine, her voice dripping with rehearsed empathy. I tried to help him, she said, eyes glistening for the camera. But some people can't be saved from themselves. I laughed, a raw, ugly sound. The irony was sharp enough to cut skin. The drive sat beside me, humming softly as files copied to my laptop. Proof, undeniable. But proof wasn't enough. I had to decide what came next. To fight her in the open, or to disappear quietly and let the truth rot unseen. I didn't realize until that moment how much I wanted the world to know. I called Arjun the lawyer, and my voice cracked before I even got the words out. I have it, I said. He didn't ask what. Bring it to my office, today. His office smelled like polished wood and ink, the kind of place where time moves slower. I slid the drive across his desk, and he studied it like a surgeon about to cut. He opened the files in silence, glasses sliding down his nose until he finally leaned back. This is more than defamation, he said. This is fraud. Malicious interference. You could bury her with this. The idea of burying Sophie didn't give me satisfaction. It just left me hollow. I don't want revenge, I admitted. I just want my name back. Arjun tapped the deck with one finger. Then we control the narrative. Press conference, controlled release of evidence. We show the world who doctored what, and we show it calmly. Not anger. Facts. I nodded slowly, though the thought of standing in front of cameras again made my stomach twist. But maybe this was the only way to stitch myself back together. To let people see the seams and the truth behind them. Do you think it'll work? I asked. He met my eyes steady. The truth doesn't always win, but it always outlives a lie. That night, I practiced in the mirror. The apartment was dim, the air thick with the smell of dust and takeout cartons I hadn't cleaned up. My reflection looked older than I remembered. Eyes shadowed, shoulders slumped. But when I recited the lines Arjun had suggested, calm, factual, unflinching, I saw a glimmer of the man I'd once been. And for the first time in months, I felt a spark. Small, fragile, but real. I went to bed with the drive on my nightstand, its little LED still glowing like a single eye watching over me. Tomorrow, I'd start reclaiming my voice. But in the back of my mind, one thought nagged. Sophie wasn't the kind of person to go down quietly. If the internet was going to watch me struggle for air, I wanted to choose the pool and learn how to breathe in it. That's what I told Rosa when I asked to rehearse the press statement on her stage, the only place that hadn't lied to me. The black box smelled like paint and dust and something faintly citrus from a mop bucket abandoned near the door. The overhead work lights warmed the crown of my head, humming like bees. I stood center, palms open, feeling the slickness of sweat on my fingers, the rubber lip of the mic cable under my shoe, the way breath sits high when you're afraid and only drops once you admit it. Rosa sat 3 rows back with a legal pad, one ankle hooked over her knee. "Again," she said, gentle, unblinking. "But this time you don't beg. You invite I read the lines Arjun had drafted. Facts, not flames. We would show the raw footage beside the doctored clip. We would display the metadata for the emails sent under my name. We would walk, unhurried, through the pitch deck titled The Hail Problem." I practiced not flinching when I said those words. I practiced leaving silence after sentences to let the room breathe with me. "Where is your body when you say, 'I'm sorry for my part in the noise'?" Rosa asked. "In my throat," I said. She shook her head. "Put it in your rib cage. Let your back widen. Sorry is not an apology to a mob. It's respect for the damage they did, too, while believing lies." We ran it until my voice found a lower shelf, until the edges of each sentence softened without losing spine. When we paused, I could hear the building settling, the faint tick of cooling bulbs, my heartbeat stepping down from its panic. Outside, the sky was a dull pewter lid, and the street smelled like rain and car brakes. I headed to Arjun's office with my notes, my stomach quiet for the first time in weeks. If stage work was a rehearsal for truth, then I had rehearsed enough to stop performing. The press conference was tomorrow. I wanted morning to come slow and steady like a curtain rising. The conference room Arjun booked wasn't glamorous. Ceiling tiles, stackable chairs, a podium that wobbled if you leaned on it. But it was ours. Reporters filtered in with the sound of nylon jackets and zipper teeth. Their lenses clicked like small, impatient metronomes. Someone's coffee steamed on a windowsill, fogging the glass and making the skyline look like it had been sketched in pencil. I breathed through my ribs like Rosa taught me, felt the rough grain of the podium under my fingertips, and let my eyes find one calm thing: a crooked exit sign glowing a steady green. Arjun spoke first, crisp and spare. He introduced the timeline, then gestured to the screen. Mia sat at the laptop, ponytail tight, expression clinical, and rolled the side-by-side audio. The doctored clip hissed like a snake. The raw file landed with human weight. You could hear the banter, the self-deprecation, the crew's laughter. You could hear the breaths that had been cut. A murmur moved the room. Not a wave. Just the first gust of weather change. I stepped to the mic. "I don't expect trust from a presentation," I began, the hook threading through my chest. "Trust likes to meet you slowly and shake your hand twice." A few pens paused. I walked them, unhurried, through the emails sent under my name. The metadata showing the IP that wasn't mine, the timestamps that overlapped with hours I'd been mic'd on set. Then the deck title splashed onto the screen. The Hail Problem. No flourish, no music. Just text, black on white, as offensive as a slap because of its steadiness. Questions came sharp. "Are you accusing Ms. Linton directly?" "Why didn't you speak sooner?" "Are you angry?" I answered in the lower shelf of my voice. "I'm accusing actions with proof," I said. "I didn't speak sooner because I was listening for my own part, and I didn't want to feed a fire with gasoline. And yes, I'm angry at a system that rewards a spectacle over a correction." When it ended, I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean, like rinsing grit from a scraped knee. Outside, the air tasted like cold metal and relief. My phone buzzed with texts. Rosa's steady thumbs up, Jules from a past film saying, "About time." Then a push alert. Sophie had scheduled a response for tonight, prime time. The day wasn't over. It had only cleared its throat. The backlash didn't vanish. It changed shape. That night, my feeds filled with reaction videos. Slow nods, cautious huhs, a few loud apologies from people who had ridden the earlier wave. But shadows held on. "He's playing victim. a thread insisted, then softened to, even if it's true, he must have done something. The human brain hates empty spaces. It fills them with old fears. I closed the apps and listened to my apartment breathe. Refrigerator humming, neighbor's TV fuzzing through the wall like faraway thunder. Distant siren unwinding into quiet. At 9 p.m., Sophie appeared on a network talk show. The studio light framed her hair like a halo. The host leaned in with consecrating sympathy. "This is hard," he murmured. She nodded, eyes glassy. "I never wanted to hurt Evan," she said, and hearing my name in her careful mouth felt like chewing tinfoil. "But sometimes intervening looks cruel." She mentioned documents, hinted at concerning behavior, and never quite said I deserved it, just placed breadcrumbs toward that conclusion and let the audience do the walking. Arjun texted, "Stick to plan. Don't take the bait." So I did the smallest, bravest thing I could think of. I made soup. Carrots, onion, garlic sweating in oil, the smell turning the kitchen tender. Steam fogged the window. I drew a line in the condensation with my finger like a kid. I ate at the counter, the spoon clinking the bowl, and let my jaw unclench. The body doesn't care about PR. It wants salt and warmth and sleep. After midnight, a ping from Jules again. A video he posted, no production value. Just his face under a lamp. "I've worked with Evan 3 times," he said. "He's stubborn. He's early. He thanks the crew by name. We all have bad days. I watched the raw cut. The edit was a lie." Comments gathered under it like rainwater. Support is quieter than outrage, but it soaks deeper. I went to bed and dreamed of cables, coiled like snakes turning back into ropes. When I woke, there was a letter from the studio's counsel asking for a meeting. Neutral ground, tomorrow. I could smell the varnish of a conference table before I even stepped into the day. The studio's conference room felt refrigerated, bone-deep cold, as if they stored liability there in blocks of ice. The carpet was too soft, swallowing footsteps. The table smelled faintly of lemon oil and unspoken rules. Across from me sat a trio in conservative suits. At the far end, as if she belonged to a different weather system, Sophie. She wore gray, the color you pick when you want to be a mirror. Her eyes met mine briefly, then traveled on like I was a painting she'd already judged. "Thank you for coming," their lead counsel said, voice even. "We are here to discuss a path forward with minimal public harm." Arjun's hand rested on his notepad, still as a metronome on one. "Our path forward starts with truth. You've seen the files." "We've seen files," the lawyer replied. "Interpretations vary." I leaned in just enough to feel the table's polish under my palm. "Interpret how breaths were cut from sentences to change intent," I said. "Interpret how emails came from an IP block assigned to your offices." Sophie shifted, then smiled, a sympathetic teacher correcting a child. "Evan," she said softly, "you know how messy productions are. Shared accounts? Assistants? It's tragic, really, how chaos can look like conspiracy." The word tragic scraped me raw. "You titled the deck the Hale Problem," I said. "Was that chaos too?" Something flickered in her jaw. Then she exhaled. "I pitched a transition because the project needed stability," she said, measured. "Your burnouts, your absences." "I asked for a weekend off after a 70-hour week," I said. "That's not absence, it's being a body with limits." The room tightened. Arjun slid a folder forward. Demand letters, proposed statements, a draft of a joint acknowledgement that the doctored clip misrepresented me. The lawyers whispered behind legal hands. Finally, "We will review." On the way out, Sophie paused at the door with me, a private corridor of breath between us. The hallway smelled like toner and cold air. "You could have taken the quiet exit," she said. "We had a plan for you, a teaching gig, a soft landing." "I don't want soft," I said. "I want honest." She studied me like a puzzle with one piece purposely lost. Honest won't hire you, she said gently. Soft might. I let the elevator doors close between us and watched my reflection ripple into steel. I didn't know if Honest would hire me. I knew I wanted it to be my boss anyway. I thought the meeting would be the hinge. Instead, it was a slow-turning screw. The studio took 2 days to review, which meant 2 days of waiting while my mind rehearsed catastrophes. I walked to keep from circling the same anxious room in my head, through a farmer's market that smelled like basil and peaches, past a repair shop where a radio murmured old soul, along a river path where eucalyptus leaves made the shade feel medicinal. Each place offered a different breath. On the second evening, Rosa called and told me to come by the theater. No agenda, she said. Just chairs and air. When I arrived, she lit only a single work light, a soft cone of gold in the center like a campfire. Sit, she said. We didn't talk for a long time. The building creaked. Heat clicked somewhere deep. Dust hung in the light like snow that had forgotten how to fall. Why her? I asked finally, voice slipping out before I could dress it in wisdom. Why would someone who knows me choose that story? Rosa uncapped a pen and drew a small circle on her pad. Because power is a story too, she said. She picked the one with the shortest commute. I thought of old nights with Sophie. Phone calls at 2 a.m., split fries at a diner, the lemony smell of her office when we landed our first deal. Grief arrived like a draft through a window I didn't know was open. Not rage. Grief. Heavy and clean. Rosa watched my shoulders drop. There, she said softly. Now the room has space for something else. When I got home, a message waited from Arjun. They're proposing a statement acknowledging the edited clip, partial restitution on contracts, and private censure of process failures. No explicit apology. No naming Sophie. The offer tasted like lukewarm tea. Polite, insufficient, better than nothing, worse than true. I stood at the window, forehead against cool glass, city light pinning my reflection to the night. I'll take the correction, I texted back, fingers steady, but I won't sign anything that silences me. Outside, a bus sighed at the stop and pulled away. The apartment exhaled with it. Tomorrow, we'd negotiate commas and consequences. Tonight, I let the soup pot soak, turned off every light but one, and lay down in the dim with a rare feeling warming the edges of my ribs. I wasn't done. The negotiation table looked different this time, not because of the oak or the water pitchers, but because I walked in steadier. The studio lawyer shuffled papers, but my eyes landed only on the document in the middle. The draft statement. Words can wound or mend, depending on how they're arranged, and these were arranged like a bandage slapped on too quickly. The clip was edited without authorization, it read, and therefore did not accurately reflect Mr. Hale's intent. Intent. The word stuck in my teeth. I didn't need them to say I had good intent. I needed them to admit it wasn't my voice saying what the world thought I said. Arjun spoke first, smooth as ever. This needs to go further. Not just intent. Authenticity. Not just unauthorized. Manipulated. The lead counsel frowned. That language exposes us to liability. It exposes the truth, Arjun countered. Sophie wasn't at the table this time, but her presence curled in the air like cigarette smoke. I could almost hear her cadence in the phrasing. Calculated vagueness, words chosen to blur instead of sharpen. I cleared my throat. I'm not asking for a gold-plated apology, I said. I'm asking for clarity. Say the footage was altered. Say it misrepresented me. Anything less keeps the mud on my face. There was a pause, the kind where pens hover mid-air. One of the younger lawyers, her hair tucked behind her ears, eyes bright with unease, finally spoke. Why not say it? Everyone knows it was tampered with now. Better to clean the wound properly than let it fester. Her voice tipped the room. Eventually, they scribbled edits, grudging but real. The new draft read, "The footage circulated of Evan Hale was deliberately altered and did not truthfully represent his words or conduct. We regret its impact." The phrase "deliberately altered" landed like cool water on a burn. It wasn't the full truth, but it was enough to start breathing again. As I signed, my hand trembled. Not with fear, but with the release of months of tension. The pen smelled faintly of ink and plastic, grounding me in the moment. Walking out, Arjun clapped my shoulder. "You just bought your name back," he said. "But names can be repaired and still carry scars." The question now was what to build on the scar tissue. The statement went public the next morning. My phone buzzed like a wasp nest. Alerts, mentions, calls. Headlines shifted tone. Studio admits altered footage, misrepresented actor. The words weren't fireworks, but they were steady. And that steadiness mattered more than any spark. The internet's chorus softened. Some apologized loudly. Others quietly deleted their earlier accusations. Most said nothing, but the silence itself felt different. Less pointed, more tentative, like a crowd deciding whether to sit back down after a false alarm. I walked to the corner cafe for the first time in weeks without my hood pulled low. The smell of espresso and buttered croissants wrapped around me as I waited in line. A barista with green hair glanced up and said, almost shyly, "Glad you're back." It was small, almost nothing, but it cracked something open inside me. Later, Rosa called. "So," she said, "do you want to keep reading to folding chairs, or are you ready to let strangers buy tickets again?" I laughed, the sound rusty but real. Folding chairs saved me, but yeah, I think I'm ready. That evening, I sat at my desk and pulled out the old notebook I hadn't touched since the chaos began. Its pages smelled faintly of dust and ink, the spine cracked from years of scribbling. I wrote down one sentence. This isn't a comeback. This is a continuation. It wasn't about reclaiming the roles I'd lost. It was about creating ones that couldn't be taken from me by edits or whispers. The theater, the smaller projects, the work that didn't require public approval to matter. I closed the notebook, a soft thump in the quiet room. On the shelf, that old photo of me and Sophie still sat in its tilted frame. I didn't move it. It belonged to a different chapter, one I could acknowledge without rereading. For the first time in months, sleep found me before exhaustion did. My last thought before drifting off was simple. Careers can end. People can end them. But voices? Voices can learn new rooms to echo in. And I wasn't finished speaking. The first rehearsal after everything broke felt like stepping onto unfamiliar ground, even though the floorboards creaked exactly as they always had. The small theater smelled of sawdust and paint thinner, the kind of scent that lives in curtains and never leaves. The folding chairs were set out in a crooked semicircle. A few new faces glanced up as I walked in, and I felt the weight of recognition. Subtle, curious, not hostile, but not free of history either. Rosa greeted me with that peppermint and paper smell, her hand firm on my shoulder. "You're not here to erase anything," she said quietly. "You're here to build with it." I nodded, throat thick. When it came my turn to read, I unfolded a monologue I'd scribbled in my notebook. The paper was crinkled, edges smudged with graphite. I began softly, almost whispering. They told me I was finished. They told me I was a problem. And maybe I am, but I'm a problem that breathes, that bleeds, that refuses to be filed away. The words carried into the rafters, and I let silence stretch after each line, just as Rosa had taught me. The room smelled warm now, sweat and light gels heating under the fixtures. My hands shook, but not from fear, from release. When I finished, the group clapped. Not politely, but like they'd felt the pulse of it. One actor, a younger guy with a scruffy beard, leaned over and whispered, "Man, that was raw." Walking home later, the city seemed sharper. The neon signs hummed. The air tasted of rain-soaked asphalt, and for once, those sensory details weren't backdrops to anxiety. They were just there. Present. My chest felt wider than it had in months. At my apartment, I opened the window and let the cool night air sweep in. Down below, someone played a saxophone badly but earnestly, the notes floating up like bent arrows. I smiled because even the flawed sounds mattered. I finally understood. My career wasn't about polish or perfection. It was about presence. And presence was something no one, not Sophie, not rumors, could cut out of me again. Of course, the industry didn't suddenly fling its doors open. If anything, the silence from casting directors was louder now, as though no one wanted to be the first to take a chance. But instead of letting that void eat me alive, I filled it myself. Rosa and I began planning a one-man show. Small venue, minimal set, all words and breath. The kind of thing that would terrify my old self. The one obsessed with glossy premieres and magazine spreads. Now it felt like oxygen. We brainstormed over greasy diner food, the smell of fried onions clinging to our clothes. "Call it the problem," Rosa suggested, eyes gleaming with mischief. I choked on my soda. "You're serious?" "Deadly. Reclaim it. Make it yours." I laughed until my stomach hurt, but the idea stuck like burrs. Back home, I scribbled scenes in my notebook. Fragments of the storm. Conversations with Sophie replayed in the cadences I remembered. Imagine dialogues between my public self and my private one. The pages piled up, smelling of ink and effort. Nights stretched into mornings. The city outside shifted, buses sighing, sirens wailing, then settling into pre-dawn quiet. But I barely noticed. I was building something out of ash. Occasionally headlines about Sophie would flare, a new contract, a rumored promotion. They stung, but less each time. Because I knew something she didn't. Power that comes from cutting someone else down is brittle. It shatters eventually. And maybe, when my little black box show opened to 30 seats and honest applause, I'd finally prove it. Not to her, not to the industry, but to myself. One night, closing the notebook, I whispered aloud to the empty room, "This is mine." The words hung steady in the air, a quiet anchor. For the first time, I didn't need an audience to believe them. Opening night was small enough to miss if you blinked. 30 mismatched chairs, the smell of popcorn someone snuck in, the creak of old floorboards under restless feet. No red carpet, no flashing cameras, just a dimly lit stage and me, standing in the halo of one spotlight. I could hear my own breath bouncing off the black walls. My palms were damp, my chest tight, but beneath it all was a strange calm. I wasn't performing to impress, I was performing to exist. The monologues flowed one into another. Fragments of betrayal, of nights pacing my apartment, of soup simmering while headlines tried to eat me alive. I told them about Sophie, though not by name, painting her as both savior and saboteur, the hand that once pulled me up and then pushed me under. I spoke about the silence of being erased and the noise of clawing back my truth with nothing but breath and ink. The audience listened. Really listened. You can always tell, the way bodies lean forward, the way no one dares cough because it might break the spell. When I reached the final line, the one Rosa had made me promise to keep, my voice steadied in a way I hadn't felt in months. She ended my career, but she didn't end me. The words settled into the walls, into the dust, into the bones of everyone sitting there. Then came applause. Not thunderous, not cinematic. Real. Afterward, people lingered. A young woman approached, eyes shining. "I don't know anything about Hollywood," she said, clutching her bag. "But I know what it feels like to be erased. Thank you." Her words pierced deeper than any review ever could. Later, walking home under streetlights that buzzed like tired bees, I passed posters for shows I used to be in. They didn't cut as sharply anymore. In my apartment, I opened the drawer where I'd stashed that old photo of Sophie. I didn't tear it up. I didn't burn it. I just looked at it once, then closed the drawer. Out of sight. Not erased, because the story wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. I sat at my desk, notebook open, pen scratching across the page. They can take your career. They can take your stage. but they can't take your story unless you let them tell it for you. I leaned back, listening to the hum of the city through the open window. Sirens, laughter, a saxophone off key but earnest. Life was moving, unbothered, unending, and so was I. This wasn't a comeback, it was a continuation, and for the first time, I felt certain. Whatever she had taken from me, she hadn't taken the one thing I could never lose, my voice. And that's where we'll close tonight's story, my Reddit story lovers. Thank you for staying with me through this journey of heartbreak, betrayal, and resilience. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to leave a like, hit subscribe to Bedtime Blocks, and share your thoughts down in the comments. I'd love to know what kind of story you'd like to hear next. Until then, rest easy, dream deep, and I'll see you in the next one.